Watching. Hello, we are beginning our second session on Twelfth Night. Um, I basically covered most of the main themes as I see them of the play in the first lecture, and therefore didn't get that far along in the play. We got up to the scene in middle act two when Malvolio catches up with Viola in the disguise of Cesario and returns the ring, which Olivia has told him that Curio, sorry, um, that Cesario left with her, which in fact is a coded signal. Rings are pretty well accepted, uh, almost universal excuse me, almost universal symbol for sexual attraction or consummation. Um, and So at the moment we're at Act Two, Scene Three. And Act Two, Scene Three begins to develop the sort of riotous sense of Toby in particular as being the engine of this Feast of Fools energy, the topsy-turviness, the disrespect for authority, the spirit of revelry, which bursts out, and the particular combination of Toby with Sir Andrew, whom he's basically trying to fleece, inviting him into the house to see how much he can soak up off of him, and Mariah and Festi, and the interruption by Malvolio, who has heard them carousing in the middle of the night and wants to quash their good spirits. So, looking at Act Two, Scene Three, for those of you following along, um, this is when Festi sings the song I just mentioned, "O Mistress Mine," uh, and it's a song a little unclear in its message. Um, it's basically to to one's love and saying, "Stay where you are." Things are going to be a little rocky at times, but everything's going to work out, which is pretty much the definition of Shakespearean comedy. It seems to me that one of the basic principles of comedy was articulated back in Midsummer Night's Dream when Lysander said, "The course of true love never did run smooth." And the insofar as comedy is always moving toward marriage, and that goes back to the theory that if tragedy is about death and the inevitability of death and how we confront death and come to terms with it, um, comedy is about how death can be overcome. And since we all know that death is universal, the only way to overcome death is through marriage and progeny. So that comedies typically end in a celebration of people getting together, and the promise that life will go on, that we will produce children and they will produce children, and the race survives and thrives. Um, so, what we have here, though, is one of the scenes I think that most clearly delineates this sense of revelry up to the point of near chaos. And some of us might sympathize with Malvolio. He's generally seen as uh, uh, a party pooper, as somebody who crushes revelry, crushes the spirit of having good times. But we can understand how his slumber has been interrupted and why he might want to suppress it. So again, we have the trouble of these are scenes in prose, and therefore it's hard to find specific line numbers that will agree in every edition, but I'll try to uh, send you in the proper direction. Um, about 75 lines in to the scene, there's an entrance of Maria, I think, at line 63 in my edition, and then Malvolio at line 75. They've been singing traditional songs. They're singing a catch, which is a round. They're generally drinking and making noise and having a good time. And Malvolio comes down like a ton of bricks. Here we are at line 75, where Malvolio's entrance is marked. My masters, are you mad? Or what are you? Have you no wit, manners, nor honesty, but to gabble like tinkers at this time of night? Do you make an ale house of my lady's house, that you squeak out your covenant that you squeak out your cosier's catches without any mitigation or remorse of voice? Is there no respect of place, person, or time in you? And Sir Toby, of course, irreverent. We did keep time, sir, in our catches. Snack up. Essentially, go hang yourself. And now he starts getting down to specifics. He has power in this household, and he can exercise it. And now he threatens to. Sir Toby, I must be round with you. My lady bade me tell you that although she harbors you as her kinsman, she's nothing allied to your disorders. If you can separate yourself and your misdemeanors, you are welcome to the house. If not, and it would please you to take leave of her, she is very willing to bid you farewell. So one wonders if he actually would have enough influence in the household to induce Olivia to drive Toby out of the house, but he's certainly threatening it. There's one more example of how Malvolio is always exaggerating his power to himself, and eventually that will be his downfall because he's always looking for greater influence and aspiring to more power than it's realistic for him to have. So they mock him and sing stuff at him um, until finally, go, sir, says Toby. This is about line 100. Go, sir, rub your chain with crumbs. And they drive him out. Um, However, they drive him out, but not yet. Um, um, because he has one more arrow in his quiver. Mistress Mary, he says, if you prized my lady's favor at anything more than contempt, you would not give means for this uncivil rule. She shall know of it by this hand. And he turns to leave. Now, this is a more valid threat because, as steward of the household, he probably has some hiring and firing influence. And the direct attack on Maria, I think, is what now puts the plot against him into motion. Go shake your ears, she says, but she is perhaps a little threatened. She has to think twice about whether they have gone too far. And because it's Toby in the house, they'll end up going farther yet. Toby is always the one who's going to push things to the next stage. And in this middle part of the play, you'll find that it's constantly Toby who is moving things along. A lot of people don't know, and I didn't know until just before I played the role years ago. My friend Robert Sicular pointed out that Toby is actually the largest role in the play, given the number of lines. We don't usually think of him, the characters we think of as the major characters are Viola, Olivia, Orsino, Malvolio, but Toby is a very substantial role, and I think that points to how much of an instigator he is, how much he puts the farcical parts of the plot into motion. And those are generally the parts of the plot that people remember about this play. They remember Malvolio, they remember the yellow stockings, they remember the phony duel between Viola and Andrew. Um, so I think we've seen now that the threat that Malvolio represents, somewhat to Toby and certainly very strongly to Maria, of whom Toby I think feels protective, uh, is what drives them to the next step, and that comes with the following conversation. Here we're still in the same scene, 2-3. That's when Mariah says at line 118 in my edition, um, marry, sir. Sometimes he is a kind of Puritan. And Sir Andrew says, oh, if I thought that, I'd beat him like a dog. And Maria, a couple of lines later, says, the devil a Puritan that he is, or anything constantly, but a time pleaser, an affectioned ass that cons state without book and utters it by great swarths. In other words, don't give him the respect of associating him with Puritans who may be people who don't like to have a lot of fun, but at least they have a genuine commitment to their beliefs. It dignifies him too much to associate him in the way that we in the modern world talk about puritanical as meaning fun hating, uh, um, against freedom, against freedom of thought in particular, and freedom of behavior. But it was at this time a little more specific in its meaning, and Shakespeare only uses the term a couple of times. So here's the nut that Maria says about him: the best persuaded of himself, so crammed as he thinks with excellencies, that it is his grounds of faith that all that look upon him love him, and on that vice in him will my revenge find notable cause to work. All right. This is Maria speaking, but very much with Sir Toby on her bandwagon. She feels protective of Toby as she does, as he does of her. Eventually, you're going to find that they will marry by the end of the play. What wilt thou do? Says Toby. I will drop in his way some obscure epistles of love, wherein, by the color of his beard, the shape of his leg, the manner of his gait, the expression of his eye, forehead, and complexion, he shall find himself most feelingly personated. I can write very like my lady your niece. On a forgotten matter, we can hardly make distinction of our hands. That is to say, if we pick up a piece of paper that one of us has written, we have to look at it very carefully to tell whether it was written by Olivia or written by Maria. And as she says, on that will my plot work. Sir Toby says, I smell a device. He shall think by the letters that thou wilt drop that they come from my niece and that she is in love with him. My purpose is indeed a horse of that color, she says. And now we're in familiar land because what we are heading toward is a plot and a scene very much like the gulling of Beatrice and Benedick in Much Ado. In that case, in both of those cases, it was done by overheard conversations. Here it's going to be a written document, which is going to be placed in a location where Malvolio will find it. And it's going to be, it has to be ambiguously phrased, but in such a way that, as she says, he shall see himself most feelingly personated. I'm not going to, uh, in Mariah is saying in essence, I'm not going to incur possible legal action by signing somebody else's name to it. But if it's anonymous and seems plausibly enough to be coming from Olivia, then I think the hook will go in. So she leaves. There's a wonderful exchange between Sir Toby and Andrew. Toby says, "Good night, Penthesilea." Penthesilea was the queen of the Amazons. And he's constantly making jokes about Mariah's size. He later says he calls her the youngest wren of nine. I suspect the role of Mariah and likewise the role of Moat, looks like moth, but moat as in dust moat, um, in Love's Labour's Lost were written for this same actor in the company, obviously a very small boy actor. And I was lucky enough to have an actress who played both those roles in my productions, who's she's still around. She's a good friend, and she's, I think, 4'8". Wonderful, wonderful miniature that fulfilled that function that Shakespeare had in mind. Um, and then an exchange I have to read because I love it deeply. Sir Andrew says, "Before me, she's a good wench." We're now, if you're looking, we're about 10 lines from the end of this scene. Sir Toby says, "She's a beagle true bred, and one that adores me. What of that?" And Andrew says, "I was adored once too." A line that I love so much that it is inscribed on my tile in the Bruns Amphitheater that we built in 1991 out in Orinda. Uh, the walls are covered with donate tiles that represent donations to the project. Um, I was adored once too, to me, is kind of a universal line. It's like the most miserable and unloved person can always has some memory of a mother that doted on him or her. Anyway, it's a line I love, and I had to talk about it. So, they go to bed. Andrew says tellingly, "If I cannot recover your niece, I am a foul way out," which is basically his way of saying, if I can't persuade Olivia to marry me, I'm in for a whole lot of money that I've thrown at this. To the degree that it apparently would cripple his finances. That's a red flag for Toby, who is counting on Andrew's continuing contributions while he's putting him up and pretending at least to further his suit to Olivia. Um, so that's something Toby is going to be worried about. This gift horse won't last forever. This goose won't lay all the golden eggs. So insofar as the friendship between Toby and Andrew is based on material grift, um, Toby has to worry about that. And the scene ends. And now we shift back to Orsino's. A rather lovely scene, and it's interesting to see that Festi is going to turn up in this scene too, as he did in the one just before. It's presumably the next morning or the next day. It's interesting that um, Feste, who we associate with the household of Olivia, turns up here as well and seems to have an entree of some sort. He's spoken of as having sung a song last night. He's called Feste the Jester, my lord. Uh, a fool that the Lady Olivia's father took much delight in. He is about the house. What's he doing about Orsino's house? That's a completely different um, locale. But Feste is later to say, foolery, sir, goes everywhere. And it seems that he's regarded as a unaligned entertainer who can move from one place to another with relative ease. Um, so they're saying we need some song now, good Cesario. This is line 2, but that piece of song, that old and antique song we heard last night. Curio says he's not here, so please your lordship that should sing it. Who was it? Feste the Jester, my lord. By the way, the only time his name is spoken in the play, and we would probably just call him the fool if it weren't for this single line. His name is Feste. And of course, that implies festivities, festival, various kinds of play and show. So seek him out and play the tune the while. Musicians begin to play. And we get a little more view of the love sickness of Orsino. And now we see also that Viola, Cesario, has become a close confidant. And this is the scene that develops this relationship in such a way as we begin to root for some way to resolve the obstacle that has been created by Viola posing as something she is not. Um, and I was going to say about comedy, Shakespearean comedy in general, it seems that in practice, the way that this movement toward marriages and progeny, which is pretty much common to all of the comedies, um, that the pattern is always obstacles that present themselves to lovers, to potential spouses, and how those obstacles are to be overcome. And the overcoming of the obstacles, sometimes serious, sometimes comic, plays itself out in such a way that um, people find out more about themselves and each other and about their ability to cope with contradiction and obstruction. Um, and I think we're to understand that when things finally settle down in the inevitable betrothals and marriages in the final act, that we have a feeling that the people are stronger for having worked through and overcome those
Don't those
obstacles.
blue flowers look nice?
Hello? Who spoke? Sherry, was that you? All
No,
right.
it was Jean speaking out of turn.
Oh, Jean. Hello, Jean. Did you want to ask a question?
I didn't know. I said out of turn.
Okay, good to see you.
And you.
All right. So
You've gotten muted, Julian. You're muted. You're still muted.
there we go. I did not mute myself. Some glitch came up. Hi. Okay. So Orsino apparently meeting Feste for the first time. Oh, fellow, come, the song we had last night. This is line 40 now in Act 2, Scene 4. Mark it, Cesario, it is old and plain, the spinsters and the knitters in the sun, and the free maids that weave their thread with bones do use to chant it. It is silly sooth and dallies with the innocence of love. I'm not sure he describes the song very well, but there's something in it that appeals to him, and we're soon to find out what it is, because this is the lyric. Come away, death, and in sad cypress let me be laid. Fly away, breath. I am slain by a fair, cruel maid. My shroud of white stuck all with you, oh, prepare it. My part of death no one so true did share it. And another verse along the same lines. I am slain by a fair, cruel maid. This is very much in the troubadour uh, tradition, which we talked about last week, that love, when thwarted, is a languishing, slow death that only the favor of the beloved could possibly turn around and redeem you from. And it's kind of funny. Interestingly, and one of the funniest sequences in the production that I directed in 1981 was an actor named Kevin Gardner, um, good actor with the early festival, who played Hamlet for us, among other things, was Orsino. And Joan Mencken, who was his Viola, he lay with his head in her lap, and the melancholy was so excruciating that the audience began to laugh. It was kind of a bonus comedy that I hadn't seen coming, because he was able to project this sense of, again, we've talked about the stuckness of the characters in Olivier, uh, in Illyria, the sense that he's at least flirting with the idea of giving up all hope and welcoming death because he can't have the lady of his dreams. So there's a little exchange between Orsino and Festi, and he's dismissed. And now we have the particularly poignant scene that I think is kind of a hinge for the play. It brings us up to date on where we are. Our focus has been over on Olivia's house, and now we return to Viola's predicament, which is to be in love with a man who doesn't know she's a woman and is totally fixated on something that he can't have, so he can't see what's sitting right in front of him. And I'm going to read a hunk of it because some of the poetry is the best in the play. Once more, Cesario, he says. In my edition, we're line 75. Get thee to yon same sovereign cruelty. Again, a way of characterizing Olivia as cruel simply because she won't fulfill the role that he's cast her for in his mind. Tell her my love, more noble than the world, prizes not quantity of dirty lands. The parts that fortune hath bestowed upon her, tell her, I hold as giddily as fortune, but 'tis that miracle and queen of gems that nature pranks her in, attracts my soul. I don't care that she's noble, I don't care that she's rich, all I care is that she is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen inside and out. I'm completely convinced of that. To which Viola, eager to find some other way forward, introduces not a new thought really, but if she cannot love you, sir, I cannot be so answered. Well, that's kind of absolute. That shows essentially how stymied he is by Olivia's refusal, and how unable to see any kind of future except this fantasy he has of encompassing Olivia and her estate. And Viola, sooth, but you must say that some lady, as perhaps there is, hath for your love as great a pang of heart as you have for Olivia. Must she not then be answered? She's starting to probe a possible strategy. Now, as I've said earlier, looking back to Juliet and also in the earlier scene with Viola, Shakespeare's heroines hate to lie. They really don't want to. It's something ethical, I think, about them. They have very strong ethics, and uh, they really don't want to lie right out. The closest Viola has said has come to lying is when she said to Olivia, "I am a gentleman." Uh, but whenever possible, she'll use what we'd probably call equivocation instead. She uses truths to mislead and change the temperature a little bit. There is no woman's sides, says Orsino, can bide the beating of so strong a passion as love doth give my heart. They lack retention, a line I love. Alas, their love may be called appetite, no motion of the liver but the palate, that suffers surfeit, cloyment, and revolt, but mine is all as hungry as the sea and can digest as much. Make no compare between that love a woman can bear me and that I owe Olivia. Well, here is, unfortunate sexism in its somewhat romanticized form, but it refuses to acknowledge the personhood of women. And that's why we're stuck. That's because the only way that Orsino can see to relate to women is as these objects of worship. And obviously, that does not acknowledge their personhood. Um, and Viola is perfectly capable of seeing that, but at the same time, all of his energy is directed not at her, where she feels it should be, except that they seem to be forming a wonderful, intimate friendship. And they probably, uh, in the course of that, they probably have conversations which are more deep and personal than Orsino is used to having with his usual coterie of male friends. So something begins to be drawn out of him, and she responds to that with something of her own, which is as close as she can come to speaking her truth. She says, "Aye, but I know." He says, "What dost thou know? Oh, come on, you're just a kid. You haven't experienced what I have." "Too well," she says, "what love women to men may owe. In faith, they are as true of heart as we. My father had a daughter, loved a man, as it might be perhaps, were I a woman, I should your lordship. Truth dressed up in not a falsehood exactly, but a careful phrasing that maintains the ambiguity of the situation. And what's her history? A blank, my lord. She never told her love, but let concealment like a worm in the bud feed on her damask cheek. She pined in thought, and with a green and yellow melancholy she sat like Patience on a monument, smiling at grief. Was not this love indeed? We men may say more, swear more, but indeed our shows are more than will, for still we prove much in our vows, but little in our love. So coming in around through the back door, as it were, she's critiquing the willed blindness that is keeping Orsino in stasis, in inability to move forward. And he's interested enough and engaged enough, I'm glad to say, that he pursues it to the point of saying, "And died thy sister of her love, my boy?" And again, she's caught in this thing of how does she speak the truth of her heart without too much misrepresentation. "I am all the daughters of my father's house, and all the brothers too." A kind of truth there, in that she has begun to embody the spirit of her dead brother as she believes. You recall I mentioned that later she says, "For him I imitate." And in a sense, she feels she is carrying her brother with her, excuse me. And by wearing his clothes, impersonating him, she is in some sense keeping him alive in her heart. And she says, "Shall I to this lady?" And he sends her off again. And we have every reason to believe that this next visit will probably be no more successful than the other, because she is living a kind of lie in her relationship with Olivia as well. Okay, now we come to the great gulling scene. Gulling in the sense of deception and playing on the superstitious self-regard of Malvolio. This is the scene that's going to entrap him. And as I say, it's reflective of those gulling scenes in Much Ado, except it involves a letter. And it introduces a new character, and his name is Fabian. I've seen him played by actors of both genders. I'll just stick with the male pronoun for now. Fabian, I know in modern political thought, there was a Fabian society that George Bernard Shaw belonged to, and the Fabians were associated with socialism, but a gradualist and idealist socialism that that abhorred violence and advocated slow change by legal means. I don't know what the relationship of that school of thought is to the naming of the character in. Are we okay? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just some notes from my life coach here. Um, so Fabian, what is Fabian doing here? And I've come to my own theory about it, which is that Feste was originally intended to be part of the plot against Malvolio, and was originally written in the early drafts of this scene because Shakespeare wanted, as he had, for instance, with the gulling of Benedict, he wanted commentary by the people watching in order to raise the level of the comedy. But I think Shakespeare discovered that Feste was being spread too thin. Feste was essentially being made too important a character if he was in scene after scene and involved in all the aspects of the plot. So I think at this point he realized he had to spin off a new character. And Fabian now is going to be part of the uh, part of the cabal led by Toby and Maria that is going to work for the downfall of Malvolio. And when I'd say if the question arises, who is he and what's he doing here? Shakespeare has written in, nay, I'll come. This is the second line of the scene. Nay, I'll come. If I lose a scruple of this sport, let me be boiled to death with melancholy. And a moment later, he says, you know, he brought me out of favor with my lady about a bear baiting here. Bear baiting, of course, very popular among the Elizabethans, but condemned by the Puritans, as we would condemn it now today. It was a nasty blood sport, but it furnishes a likely reason why Fabian, who apparently is part of the household because he calls Olivia my lady, is one more casualty of Malvolio's personal morality, which he is trying to impose on the entire household. Finally, enter Maria at line 10, and she says, get ye all three into the box tree, which is basically topiary, a trimmed shrub in a box. And that gives us a little hint as Shakespeare would have staged this on the usually bare Shakespearean stage. Apparently, they have carried or wheeled on a couple of saplings, small bushes, shrubs, trees, whatever, in boxes, and that can be now used as hiding places for Toby, Andrew, and Fabian as they watch Maria's plot unfold. So she says he's been yonder in the sun. We're at line 14, meaning Malvolio, practicing behavior to his own shadow this half hour. And that and the first part of the scene that follows here, I think, is important because we're going to find at some point the plot against Malvolio excessive. It's going to give us some problems because it seems that Toby, once he's got it in motion, doesn't know when to take the foot off the accelerator. And the ensuing humiliations of Malvolio are going to take a dark turn. So as much as possible, I think, the playwright wants to make it a comeuppance which Malvolio has earned. Although the deception of the letter is very much an invention by Maria and Toby. We want to believe, I think, if we're going to be able to get any humor out of Malvolio's humiliation, which is coming down the road, we want to believe that he's earned the misfortunes which are going to encounter him. So it's important then that we start with a soliloquy before the letter even enters the conversation. And here it is at line 20, approximately. It's at enter Malvolio. 'Tis but fortune, all is fortune. Maria once told me she did affect me, and I have heard herself come thus near, that should she fancy, it should be one of my complexion. Besides, she uses me with a more exalted respect than anyone else that follows her. What should I think on't? And I won't talk a lot about the side comments that are made by the other characters. I'm going to stick with Malvolio mostly to avoid confusing you too much. There are lines coming up like "Souter will cry out on, though it be as rank as a fox," that uh, turned up in a skit I saw once about how incomprehensible Shakespeare is. Um, but the tone of them is clear. They are infuriated by having just to watch him and the way he postures, and at the same time they're making jokes at his expense. But as I say, I'll stick with the main thread through, which is Malvolio imagining himself as the lord of the house after he has presumably married the mistress, Olivia. And at line 30 in my edition, to be Count Malvolio. There is example for it. The lady of the Strachey married the yeoman of the wardrobe. Having been 3 months married to her, sitting in my state, calling my officers about me in my branched velvet gown, having come from a daybed where I have left Olivia sleeping. That one really infuriates Toby. Calling my officers about me um, in my branched velvet gown. Yes, I had that. I'm sorry. And then to have the humor of state, and after a demure travel of regard, telling them I know my place as I would they should do theirs, to ask for my kinsman Toby. 7 of my people with an obedient start make out for him. I frown the while, and perchance wind up my watch or play with my some rich jewel. Toby approaches, curtsies there to me. I extend my hand to him thus, quenching my familiar smile with an austere regard of control, saying, Cousin Toby, my fortunes having cast me on your niece, give me this prerogative of speech. You must amend your drunkenness, and so forth. So, the fantasy, the self-created fantasy of Malvolio's having become the Count by marrying Olivia, which, by the way, is contrary to Elizabethan legal succession practice. You do not suddenly become a count by marrying a countess. You become her consort, as would happen later with Queen Victoria, for instance. Um, and that brings the watchers to the point of fury, because it is so clear what his program is and how far advanced it is. And at that point, he sees the letter. And now we're into the machinations of the Maria Toby plot. So, what employment have we here? He picks up this letter, which is sealed with wax. By my life, this is my lady's hand. So this is written on the outside of the letter. It appears to be the address. These be her very C's, her U's, and her T's, and thus makes she her great P's. This is a bawdy Shakespearean joke. Cut was the Elizabethan slang term to which eventually acquired an N after the U. Thus makes she her great P's. This is just pure joke for the audience. It certainly goes way over Malvolio's head. Sometimes the watchers, Toby and Andrew, clue to it because it's Mariah's little joke, apparently. But Shakespeare sometimes can't resist throwing in a dirty word or two, and that's what he's doing here. And still on the outside of the letter is to the unknown beloved, this and my good wishes. By your leave, wax, he says, which means that he's breaking it open. Some actors, myself included, sneezed at this point and realized that they had inadvertently opened the letter. Oh, so now that it's open, I might as well read it. So it has evocative verses, although who they're addressed to is not yet clear. Jove knows I love, but who? Lips do not move, no man must know. No man must know. What follows? The numbers alter. No. I may command where I adore, but silence like a Lucrece knife. With bloodless stroke my heart doth gore. MOAI doth sway my life. And he tries hard to make sense out of my. What can that mean? And eventually he discovers, oh, all these letters are in my name. What do you know? I'm jumping forward a little bit here. This is to his next long speech, which I have at line 116. MOAI. This simulation is not as the former. Boy, every one of these letters is in my name. And now he reads the main body of the letter. If this fall into thy hand, revolve. I've never known an actor playing Malvolio who couldn't take the hint there and slowly turn around. Although, of course, clearly it means think it over. In my stars I am above thee, but be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. This is a classic example of a line of Shakespeare's which has become famous completely out of context. Given the circumstances, it's deeply ironic. But the joke is that Malvolio takes it at face value, and he thinks that he could be that rare breed of greatness that is thrust upon him. I'll cut through this. 6 lines down, he says, be opposite with a kinsman, surly with servants. Let thy tongue tang arguments of state. Put thyself into the trick of singularity. She thus advises thee that sighs for thee. Remember who commended thy yellow stockings and wished to see thee ever cross-gartered. I say, remember, go to, thou art made, if thou desirest to be so. If not, let me see thee a steward still. That jumps out at him. The fellow of servants, and not worthy to touch fortune's fingers. Farewell, she that would alter services with thee, the fortunate unhappy. And he swallows it hook, line, and sinker. He exactly as Maria had intended, in handwriting that looks like Olivia's, and in phrases that she would probably never use. But that's all. That all doubts are overcome by his desperate desire to have this be true. And he talks himself into it at the point. She did commend my yellow stockings of late. She did praise my leg being cross-gartered. I don't think those things happened. I think he's making it up in this fantasy world he's living in. Thou canst not choose but know who I am. If thou entertainst my love, let it appear in thy smiling. Thy smiles become thee well, therefore in my presence still smile, dear my sweet, I prithee. And he says, Jove, I thank thee. I will smile. And this is, again, a great moment for actors in which a face which is only used to frowning and taking on expressions of command and disdain attempts to make those muscles develop into a smile. Usually a very rich comic moment, and he rushes off to buy some yellow stockings and some garters and appear before his lady love in what he believes is what she most wants to see. And Mariah correctly, they're all falling around on the ground laughing at what they've just seen. Mariah correctly predicts what's going to happen. He will come to her in yellow stockings and and 'tis a color she abhors, by the way, and very often um, Sir Andrew favors yellow clothes, and he realizes for the first time he's been wearing a color she hates. And cross-gartered, a fashion she detests, and he will smile upon her, which will be now so unsuitable to her disposition, being addicted to a melancholy as she is. She's not quite up to date on Olivia, as we'll soon see. She's still, last time she saw Olivia, she was still in deep mourning. Now things are changing on that front, but she doesn't know it yet. And follow me, she says, to the gates of Tartar, and Sir Andrew is one too, and they go off to enjoy the fruits of their little game that they are playing to bring Malvolio down a peg. And unfortunately, they're going to discover it brings him down a little more than a peg, that the plot they've set in motion runs a little bit out of control. And we're into Act 3 now. And it begins with Viola as she has been ordered to go to Olivia and try again. And she encounters Feste, who seems to be everywhere, at the gates of Olivia's house. And they have an exchange, which is an interesting exchange. I don't think I have time to go into it in great detail. Um, he filches a couple of coins off her. Feste is always looking for a tip or a gratuity or something. That's apparently what he lives by. But there's a few words in this that are worth looking at. At line 23, I think, 25, she says, Art thou not the Lady Olivia's fool? Feste responds, No, indeed, sir, the Lady Olivia has no folly. She will keep no fool, sir, till she be married. And fools are as like husbands as pilchards are to herrings, the husband's the bigger. I am indeed not her fool, but her corrupter of words. And this begins to sort of hint at what Shakespeare's view of the fool is and what Feste's view of himself is. I've already touched on this, so I won't go into it too deeply, except the thing to remember about the fool is the one who he likes to make jokes, he likes to keep it light, but at the same time, he's the one who will tell you what no one else will tell you about yourself. And in a sense, he's a guardian of truth. We've seen it with Malvolio. We've seen hints of it with Olivia. And he also calls himself in this same scene her corrupter of words, which is a strangely ambiguous phrase, but it points to the way he uses language to further his own program. And in my opinion, as I've said before, his program ultimately is to liberate Olivia from her mourning and from the influence of Malvolio, and let her begin to see the path forward to becoming her own person. She has all the tools available to her. She has money. She has status. But her very genuine grieving for her father and her brother have kept her in a suspended state. And she has declared that that suspended state is going to last for another 7 years. And Feste is smart enough to see that that will wither her in the end and simply invite Malvolio to take over the household more than he already has. So once again, almost everything in the plot is circling around Olivia and what is going to happen to her. And Viola has a comment as he goes in to inform Olivia that Cesario has come to visit. And here at line 50, at his exit, we hear, "This fellow is wise enough to play the fool, and to do that well craves a kind of wit. He must observe their mood on whom he jests, the quality of persons and the time, not like the haggard check at every feather that comes before his eye." A haggard is a hawk before it is properly trained and will just go after any prey. And part of the falconer's art is to train it to only fly at legitimate prey. This is a practice as full of labor as a wise man's art. For folly that he wisely shows is fit, but wise men, folly fallen, quite taint their wit. So once again, the old Shakespearean homily, which is that, well, wise men think they're wise, but they're never as wise as they think they are, and they're incapable of perceiving the folly in themselves, whereas fools have essentially given that battle up. They have accepted that they are human and therefore fools, and therefore have a unique perspective to see the world and the people around them accurately. So, as it happens, Toby and Andrew come along at this point and Andrew in particular, and Toby too, they're beginning to realize that this Cesario that keeps coming over is a threat of some kind, um, certainly to Andrew's program of getting her to fall in love with him, which of course is completely fantastic. It's not going to happen. So that there's a little incipient hostility here, and it comes out in a little exchange of jabs here and there. Andrew thinks it's going to be fun to throw a little French. Dieu vous garde, monsieur. And she speaks back in probably a language she is fluent in. Et vous aussi, votre serviteur. And perfectly willing to enter into a conversation in French with Andrew, which he's incapable of carrying on. And they make some jokes about understanding. This is used a couple of times in Shakespeare. "My legs do better understand me, sir." That is, I stand and they're under me. "Than I understand what you mean by bidding me taste my legs." And eventually, Olivia enters to break it up, along with Maria. And Viola, maybe she's not even letting Orsino write his material anymore. She does it better herself. "Most excellent, accomplished lady, the heavens rain odors on you." which is very much the language of troubadour courtship. Um, and Andrew, who often has a little notebook, starts writing down, oh, odors, pregnant and vouchsafed. I'll get them all three ready. He's always ready to absorb anything that is going to make him a more accomplished wooer. Um, and we get into a conversation now with Viola and Olivia. And what's the difference from the conversation before? This one begins in verse. Um, you could say perhaps uh, Viola begins it. My duty, madam, and most humble service is a perfect line of verse. And Olivia falls right into it. And there is an indication now that Olivia is beginning to feel the emotions that elevate your emotions into, in Shakespearean practice, using blank verse, and eventually probably using rhyming couplets as well. Each level of poetic craft is a slightly higher level of emotional investment. What is your name? I'm at line 82. Cesario is your servant's name, fair princess. My servant, sir. 'Twas never merry world since lowly feigning was called compliment. Your servant to the Count Orsino, youth, and he is yours, and his must needs be yours. Your servant's servant is your servant, madam, and this volleying, jousting back and forth, a little clever, a little emotional. Finally, madam, I come to whet your gentle thoughts on his behalf. We're at line 90. And Olivia just doesn't want to go there anymore. Oh, by your leave, I pray you, I bade you never speak again of him, but would you undertake another suit? I had rather hear you to solicit that than music from the spheres. Dear lady, trying to break into this flow. And now Olivia opens herself up. Give me leave, beseech you. I did send, after the last enchantment you did hear, a ring in chase of you. So did I abuse myself, my servant, and I fear me you, remembering that abuse in Shakespeare usually means deceive. Under your hard construction must I sit, to force that on you in a shameful cunning which you knew none of yours. What might you think? And what emerges in this scene will be made more explicit later is that Olivia knows she's done what ladies in mourning are not supposed to do. She has entertained a visitor. She has engaged with a young man, and now she is falling for him. And that really opens her up to all kinds of criticism because ladies aren't supposed to take the initiative there. They're supposed, but unfortunately, all the initiative is coming through Cesario from Orsino, and that's not what she wants to hear. So finally, a clock strikes. This is at line 114, and she says, the clock upbraids me with the waste of time. And she puts on a bravura. She basically, I would say, her her the conscience of propriety that she maintains as a Renaissance lady momentarily takes her over. And she says to herself, I can take control of my situation by taking the initiative. The clock upbraids me with the waste of time. Be not afraid, good youth. I will not have you. That's the first time she has actually said, I, I, I renounce any designs I have on you. But almost immediately, that begins to weaken. And yet when wit and youth is come to harvest, your wife is like to reap a proper man. And finally it bursts out 3 lines later. She says, "Stay, I prithee, tell me what thou think'st of me." And I think there's a lot of pain in that. She's at war with herself. The rules of her society don't allow her to reach out to a commoner, and yet her hormones are raging. Um, and it leads to this very interesting exchange. Viola says that you do think you are not what you are. In other words, you're deceiving yourself. You need to be in touch with what you really want. Olivia, if I think so, I think the same of you. Well, that hits the spot. Viola, almost half to herself, says, then think you right, I am not what I am. I would you were as I would have you be. Would it be better, madam, than I am? I wish it might, for now I am your fool. And she's starting to get a little angry. And basically, Olivia's response to that is, "Oh, you're so cute when you're angry. Oh, what a deal of scorn looks beautiful in the contempt and anger of his lip." And finally, 3 lines later, 132 or so, she breaks out with, "Cesario, by the roses of the spring, by maidhood, honor, truth, and everything, I love thee so, that maugre all thy pride, nor wit nor reason can my passion hide." And she finally declares herself. Now we're in full verse here, and in rhyming couplets as well, by the way. We see this whole speech is in couplets: spring, everything, pride, hide, clause, cause, fetter, better. And she's now fully in love language. This is as deep as you can get in it in Shakespeare. And Viola has to turn it aside, given her position. "I have one heart, one bosom, and one truth, and that no woman has. That is true. Nor never none shall mistress be of it, save I alone. And so adieu, good madam." And the scene ends unresolved, with Olivia having put it all on the line to say, "I am desperately in love with you," and still being turned down. So she's in a very difficult place. I should say that many designers will have put her in a different costume in this scene, one that perhaps has traces of the mourning costume, but is beginning to grow out of it as she matures, as she begins to become a woman, and at the same time as the love for Cesario begins to edge out the mourning for her brother that has essentially ruled her up till this time. Okay, now we have a new plot development coming. This is Act 3, Scene 2. And Andrew has finally had enough. He's seen Olivia, he's seen the looks that Olivia throws at Cesario. And she never looks at him that way. In fact, she barely knows he's alive and will not admit him to her presence. And he's finally beginning to get the picture that Olivia is going to be a no-go. And of course, that's a threat to Toby because he's Toby's cash cow, his piggy bank, whatever metaphor you want to use. So we have a little tussle between the two of them. And Fabian jumps in to help because he's an ally of Toby, and he tries to build Andrew back up. "She did show favor to the youth in your sight," line 14, only to exasperate you, to awake your dormouse valor, to put fire in your heart and brimstone in your liver. And she's saying, this is your opportunity now. If you can deal directly with the boy that seems to be taking up all of Olivia's attention and show her that you're the better man, that's your way back into her good graces. And this turns into the challenge, which Toby suggests that he make rough, rude, insulting as possible. Taunt him with a license of ink, says Toby. Wonderful line that I use in my teaching. If thou thou'st him some thrice, it shall not be amiss. There is no verb for this in English, actually, but there is in Spanish and French, tutear or tutoyer, which means to use the tu, the thou form with the person you're talking to. So that's basically regarded as insulting language directed to an inferior. And so he sends Andrew off, says, put in some oaths, talk rough, make it really insulting, make it a challenge. And Andrew rushes off to write the letter. Fabian observes, this is a dear mannequin to you, Sir Toby. And he means dear, I think, in the sense of, you really like the guy. And he says, no, I have been dear to him, lad, some 2,000 strong or so. I've already leached 2,000 pounds off of this guy, and I don't want to stop now, because that's what's basically keeping me going. And Maria comes in and says, it's time to go look at what Malvolio has done. He's in yellow stockings and cross garters. And then we have another wonderful set piece coming up, which is going to be the spectacle of Malvolio's attempting to be what he imagines Olivia is looking for. But first, we have another scene with Sebastian and Antonio, which I need to deal with briefly. It's Act 3, Scene 3. And interestingly enough, they are now speaking in verse. You recall that their first scene was in prose and only ended with a verse tag when Antonio said, I think I'll follow you to the court. And now the fact that they're both in verse shows, I think, that the emotional bond between them has strengthened. And there's more heart in my parlance. And it's expressed by Sebastian as my kind Antonio. I can no other answer make but thanks and ever thanks. And Antonio, wanting not to push things too much, says, here's a purse. I'm giving you some money. Find your way around. This town can be a fun place if you know where to look. So look around. Why I your purse? Says Sebastian. Haply your eye shall light upon some toy you have desire to purchase. That could have a double entendre to it. I'm not sure it does. But they decide that they will meet later at the Elephant, which is the inn where both are staying. And we go back to Olivia one more time. Olivia with Viola. No, without Viola at this point. Olivia thinking about Cesario. How shall I feast him? What bestow on him? Oh, she says, where's Malvolio? He is sad and civil and suits well for a servant with my fortunes. Where is Malvolio? And Maria, who's been just waiting for that question, says, he's coming, madam, but in very strange manner. He is sure possessed, madam. Well, that's a very loaded word in the Elizabethan, which believes in demonic possession. And that's the fiction that's going to drive the next scene. Um, I am as mad as he, says Olivia, if sad and merry madness equal be. And in he comes. And of course, this is a huge sight gag. Generally, the audience will laugh for a couple of minutes while Malvolio enters, postures, poses, and shows off his new garb. Sweet lady, ho ho, and the smile as best he can. And whatever an actor can do with that smile, he will milk it for all it's worth. Smilest thou, she says, I sent for thee upon a sad occasion. Sad, lady? I could be sad. This does make for some obstruction in the blood. There's cross garters. But what of that? If it please the eye of one, it is with me as the very true sonnet is. Please one, please all. And he's off. Not black in my mind, though yellow in my legs, and so forth. Wilt thou go to bed, Malvolio? Really, take a pill and put yourself to sleep. To bed? Oh, aye, mistress, and I'll come to thee. Everything she says, he takes as encouragement. And of course, this scene is a comic masterpiece and can never fail. Um, it plays itself pretty much. And he starts quoting, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them with probably a sexual innuendo. And finally, she flees the stage with the line, good Maria, let this fellow be looked to. Where's my cousin Toby? Let some of my people have a special care of him. Well, it's like, asking the drug dealer to help with your friend's overdose. It's just the wrong person to call in. Uh, and she flees the stage in order to deal with what's important to her at this point. Uh, in that once more, if Cesario has returned, and whenever he's in the property, she can't think of anything else. So she rushes off to that and leaves Malvolio alone, and he soliloquizes. I won't read all of it. Cast thy humble slough, says she. Be opposite with a kinsman, surly with servants. Let thy tongue tang with arguments of state. And when she went away now, let this fellow be looked to. Fellow, not Malvolio, nor after my degree, but fellow. Everything that she said, every look that she's given him is yet more evidence to him that she is crazy for him and that his fondest dreams are going to be realized. And then in come Toby, Fabian, and Maria, and they treat him uh, like the madman that he is or appears to be, except a little more seriously, and we'll see where this is headed. Um, I brought them in with a bell, book, and candle, respectively, to perform an exorcism, because clearly, to the Elizabethans, if you're running mad, it's because you're possessed by evil spirits. So uh, they surround him with blessings and incantations, and everything he says. Uh, Understandably annoyed by them, they take as yet further evidence of his madness. And finally, it comes to line 114, the fatal decision. Come, we'll have him in a dark room and bound. And of course, this is standard Elizabethan practice for the mad. You beat them, you starve them, you hose them down with cold water, and you put them in a dark room, tied up. That's the Elizabethan mental hospital. That's what they did at Bridewell, or Bedlam, rather. Bethlehem Hospital, which was known as Bedlam, and will encounter an alleged escaped Bedlam beggar in King Lear when Edgar takes that guise. The treatment of the mad was primitive and brutal. And that's where this begins to tip over the edge from comedy into something darker. And we'll see some evidence of that as we go on. But first we have to deal with another comic set piece. And this is the alleged duel that Fabian and Sir Toby have cooked up between Andrew and Viola, Cesario. He's written out a challenge. It's ridiculous. Youth, whatsoever thou art but a scurvy fellow. Thou comest to the Lady Olivia, and in my sight she uses thee kindly, but thou liest in thy throat. That is not the matter I challenge thee for. It's garbled, it's terrible. Basically, Toby tears it up. He says, "Not now will I deliver his letter, but I will deliver his challenge by word of mouth." We have one more glimpse at line 166, if you're anywhere near where I am in your edition. Olivia enters with Viola. "I have said too much unto a heart of stone." Of course, we're back into verse because that's where Olivia now lives. "Here where this jewel for me, 'tis my picture." That's a classic Renaissance thing. You give a miniature picture of yourself to the person who is in love with you. And "What shall you ask of me that I'll deny? That honor saved may upon asking give." And Viola sticking to her guns. "Nothing but this, your true love for my master." And this is as good a time as any to ask what it is costing Viola to be pressing the suit of the man she loves to another woman. And good actresses playing Viola, there's plenty of comedy to be mined from the situation, but a good actress will also deal with the pain and the complexity of emotions that is plaguing her at this point. They part again unsatisfactorily, with Olivia saying, "Well, come again tomorrow." We're in this cycle now of we're stuck again. Now we're stuck in a slightly different configuration, but we're still stuck with Olivia now loving what she can't have, just in the way that Orsino loved what he couldn't have. And it's come again tomorrow, and we'll do it all again. "Fare thee well, a friend like thee might bear my soul to hell," which in some editions is "a fiend like thee might bear my soul to hell," depending on whether you go with the folio or with the editors. As Viola is trying to leave to get back to Orsino's, she is confronted by Toby. "Gentleman, God save thee, that defense thou hast, betake thee to it. Of what nature the wrongs are thou hast done him I know not, but thy interceptor, full of despite, bloody as the hunter, attends thee at the orchard end." Now, like any Elizabethan gentleman, Cesario has presumably been wearing a sword all the time. That was just part of the gentleman's dress. So if you wear a sword, it's to be assumed that you can defend yourself, acquit yourself. Modern dress productions have to get around this in various ways, and in them, it's Fabian and Toby who have to furnish the weapons. But the fact is, we're headed toward a comic fight in which both participants are deadly afraid of each other. and neither is a trained fighter. I was talking to my friend Jen LeBlanc the other day, who has played Viola, and she says, well, um, Viola and Sebastian may have grown up together and done everything together, except when it came to uh, the sword fighting. So the days that it was time to train the young people in fighting, Sebastian went off to the fencing master, Viola went off to the singing master. And that's why she says earlier that I can sing and work in many kinds of music. So in that respect, they differ for all their similarities to each other. Um, and she is suddenly confronted with having to fight a duel that she has no idea what she has done to incur the anger of this stranger. And somehow she gets finagled into having to hold a sword and enter into a private duel. Just before that, there's wonderful back and forth. I don't have time to go into it greatly, but a wonderful back and forth between Fabian and Toby, each running to the opposite and back, during the course of which Fabian gets Andrew to pledge his horse if he can somehow get out of the fighting the duel. And Toby says, "That's good. I can sell that horse for a good price." Um, Finally, they are induced to engage, and this is generally speaking a wonderful comic opportunity for the director and the fight director, choreographer, to create all kinds of hijinks with people who are wielding swords and don't know what to do with them. And if you've watched any of the videos, you'll see that, various directors and periods of history deal with them in different ways. But always a big audience favorite is another of these can't miss scenes in which almost anything you do is going to be funny if the actors know what they're doing. Enter first Antonio, who has been wandering around the streets and sees, as he thinks, Sebastian engaging with a dangerous sword fight, and he jumps right in. Put up your sword. If this young gentleman have done offense, I take the fault on me. If you offend him, I for him defy you. In other words, he's saying, I don't care whose fault this fight, but I'm with him. And Antonio is far from the inept and untrained fighters that both Viola and Andrew are. He is deadly serious and dangerous. And probably Andrew and or Toby would be dead in a couple of minutes if it weren't for the fact that the officers suddenly appear. We haven't heard anything about these police or guards, whatever they are, and who have recognized Antonio as a wanted man. They call him a pirate. He denies it. As I've said, he's probably something close to what we call a privateer. Um, but in any case, he was in a military engagement against the ships of Orsino, and Orsino's young nephew Titus lost his leg. So he's a serious criminal in the eyes of the Illyrian authorities, such as they are. And they are going to cart him off to prison. I have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to really have to wind things up. Many Shakespeare comedies, and perhaps most, have a moment. They seem to have a moment somewhere around Act 4 in which something clicks into place and you realize, and the characters begin to realize, everything is going to work out. And I think very interestingly, this happens here, where Antonio turns to Viola, thinking she is Sebastian, and says, I'm in real trouble here. You could give me that money back that I lent to you because I'm going to need it to buy my way out of this. And Viola has no idea what he's talking about. In a rather pathetic gesture, she says, What money, sir? For the fair kindness you have showed me here, I'll make division of my present. She hands him a couple of coins, which is, here's half my coffer, she says. And he is shocked. Here is the boy who was professing deep friendship and love to him half an hour ago, and now suddenly affecting not to know him, and that drives him pretty crazy. And the key line that he utters is when he's running a big guilt trip on the supposed Sebastian, I snatched one half out of the jaws of death, relieved him with such sanctity of love, and to his image did I devotion. But oh, how vile and idle proves this God. And then he says, Thou hast, Sebastian, done good feature shame. And when Viola hears that, I think, click, everything changes. There's no way that anyone would know the name Sebastian here unless they had encountered him. And she had kept herself alive, I think, after the shipwreck for a little while at least, telling herself that somehow her brother had survived, and yet he hasn't turned up. And some time has passed. It's clearly at least a few weeks, I think, is my feeling of it. And Antonio is then led off to prison before she has a chance to ask him anything. So she can't follow up on the clue. Well, a good deal happens now. I'm going to sort of speed to the last couple of scenes, what I can do with them. Sebastian encounters Festi, and then while they're chatting, come in Andrew, Toby, and Fabian. Andrew has been convinced by Fabian and Toby that what he needs to do is really tackle this guy and give him what for. So he walks up to him and slaps him. And Sebastian, who has no idea who he is, decks him. And suddenly we're in a new fight. And Toby draws his sword, and they're starting yet another engagement, at which point enter Olivia. And she sees, as she thinks, Cesario under attack from her uncle. She dresses him down and kicks him off stage and basically says to Sebastian, I'm so sorry, come with me. And we begin to see the pieces are falling back into place. There's a sense of inevitability that's beginning to grow, that somehow Sebastian and Viola are going to find each other, and that all of these knots and misunderstandings are going to be cleared up. But first, we have yet another set piece involving Festi, now impersonating Sir Topas, the local curate, and visiting Malvolio in jail, in whatever confinement he's been put in, probably in some cellar in Olivia's house. And the torment continues. There's funny stuff in here. There is the impersonation of a priest by a fool, which is comic gold to start with, and wonderful language like, let me see, I say to you, this house is dark. And Festi says, Madman, thou errest. I say there is no darkness but ignorance. in which thou art more puzzled than the Egyptians in their fog. And, well, nonsense of various sort. There's something about the windows as transparent as barricados, and the south north, the clear stories to the south north are as transparent as ebony, or words to that effect. It's just pure nonsense. Then he comes back again in his own guise and torments Malvolio some more, along with, you are mad indeed if you be no better in your wits than a fool. And Malvolio is desperate to get word to Olivia that he is being wronged, and finally induces Feste to bring some pen, ink, and paper in which he's going to write his final appeal. Malvolio is in very desperate shape, and in many productions he's dressed in the rags that are all that are left of the cross gartering and the yellow stockings, and a pathetic figure. And that's how he will appear when he finally turns up at the end. We have Sebastian. I'm going to take another 8 minutes here. We have Sebastian. Suddenly, this gorgeous young woman is throwing herself at him. She is rich, she is connected, she is well dressed, she lives in a beautiful place, and she now produces a priest and says, let's get married right now. And Sebastian, who, thought 5 minutes ago that he had lost everything, now suddenly says, if this be a dream, I'm just going to keep on dreaming. And he says yes. And again, we see now, it's difficult to talk about this without getting into some difficult gender questions, which is, Olivia is getting her heart's desire by marrying a man that she just met. Sebastian is not who she's in love with. She's in love with Viola. And we have to sort of sort that out for ourselves. And I think Shakespeare's audience was asked to, for one thing. They knew that the boy playing Viola and the boy playing Sebastian were of the same gender. But we were supposed to suspend that disbelief and accept Viola as a young woman playing a young man. It gets complicated. It gets even more complicated in As You Like It, by the way, when Rosalind, played by a boy, not pretends to be, but sort of plays the role of a young woman to engage with Orlando. The Elizabethan theater is naturally going to run into this kind of gender complexity. And perhaps the success that this play has for the modern viewer sort of depends on your ability to identify the brother and sister with each other. And I've never quite worked this out for myself. It seems to work for audiences. Modern, more and more these days, both Sebastian and Viola are played by the same actor, usually an actress. And I'm not crazy about that, because it involves having an actor play a scene with him or herself, because you can't get past the point of, in Act 5, they finally appear on stage together and engage with each other. Now, in a film, you can get away with it, and the new version that I've recommended finesses that just fine. You see the back of a black person's head while you see the face of the actress, and you can edit and cut that back and forth. I've seen it done on stage, and I don't think it's very successful. I don't think it does what the play was designed to do. But in any case, uh, I don't have time to talk much about the final scene, except I will talk about this, which is uh, the moment of recognition between them, which I think we've seen coming now, sort of ever since the name Sebastian was spoken, probably a half hour ago. We are working toward this moment at which they've come face to face with each other. And there's a strange little exchange. I will give you a line number if you want to look for it. It's Act 5, Scene 1, starting at just about line 207 or so. Suddenly, everybody realizes that there are two identical figures on stage. Antonio says, Sebastian, are you? Fearest thou that, Antonio? How have you made division of yourself? An apple cleft in two is not more twin than these two creatures. Which is Sebastian? Olivia says, most wonderful, which always gets a big laugh. It's a line of verse all by itself. Do I stand there? I never had a brother. And they feel their way to each other. And then there's a funny exchange in which they seem to require proof, as if it weren't enough to see your sister, your brother standing face to face with you. My father had a mole upon his brow, says Viola, and Sebastian says, and so had mine, and died that day when Viola from her birth had numbered 13 years. He said, oh, that record is lively in my soul. And I've even tried to play that scene straight. But I realized ultimately, I think it's the moment they see each other, they know. And Viola has been looking for this moment ever since she realized Sebastian was alive. And I think they can't help themselves. They start playing a little private game. My father had a mole upon his brow. What do you know? So did mine. And that to me says a lot about the brother-sister relationship and how comfortable they are in it. We just basically have one more thing to deal with, and that is, I wish I had a little more time, and that is Malvolio, newly let out of prison, who ragged, miserable, humiliated beyond belief, appears before Olivia and shows her the letter, which convinced him that he was in love with her. And she takes one look at it, of course, and says, sorry, Malvolio, this isn't my handwriting. It looks a little like Mariah's. There's a speech he has, and this is apt. In my edition, again, at line 308 of Act 5, Scene 1. He says, of the letter, he says, you must not now deny it is your hand. Write from it, if you please, or hand or phrase. Why you have given me such clear lights of favor, bade me come smiling and cross-gartered to you, to put on yellow stockings, and to frown upon Sir Toby and the lighter people. Why have you suffered me to be imprisoned, kept in a dark house, visited by the priest, and made the most notorious geck and gull that e'er invention played on? Tell me why. And that speech was opened up for me long before I played the role. I had seen a college production in which I thought the actor hit that perfectly because there's a tendency to bluster and be angry. And instead, he was barely audible. He was so deeply humiliated that your heart went out to this ruin of a man. And finally, everything is explained to her and to him, but Feste can't quite leave it alone. So he has to, Fabian explains what happened, and then Feste has to step in. Why, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrown upon them. I was one, sir, in this interlude, one sure topus, sir, but that's all one. By the Lord, fool, I am not mad. But do you remember, madam, why laugh you at such a barren rascal, and you smile not? He's gagged. And thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenges. This is twisting the knife. And Malvolio has only one line left, but it's a famous one. I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you. Exit. And we've got a happy ending here, but something has thrown a pall over it. And different directors deal with it in different ways. I was doing a very festive production, so I made a bit of a joke of it. Olivia, who has the next line, said, he hath been most notoriously abused, notoriously being a favorite word of Malvolio's, and everybody laughed it off. But if I did it today, I'd probably do it different. Because I think the emotional damage done to Malvolio tends to resonate in the air after the happy ending. And I think every reader and every spectator encounters it in a different way. And I think that ambiguity, ambivalence maybe, and melancholy is then embodied in Feste's final song, which is the rain it raineth every day. It's a capsule version of a human life. When that I was a little tiny boy, a foolish thing was but a toy. But when I came to man's estate, 'gainst knaves and thieves men shut their gate. But when I came alas to wive, by swaggering could I never thrive. But when I came unto my beds, with tosspots still had drunken heads. It's rather an enigmatic lyric. Nobody, critics, actors, directors, have ever been able to quite agree on what it means. But it ends with, a great while ago the world begun, but that's all one, our play is done, for the rain it raineth every day. The film made by Trevor Nunn, the rather good film that came out 20 years ago, I thought had the right tone because Ben Kingsley, who played Feste, who was always kind of a liminal character, kind of on the edge between comedy and seriousness, was packing up his knapsack and hitting the road because what he has done to Malvolio is near criminal. And he has destroyed really his own ability to stay in Olivia's household. And I think what's ahead of him is the road and the unknown. And I liked the bittersweetness of that ending. I think that's true to the curious flavor of this particular play. So we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left, or we could go maybe a few minutes over if anyone has interesting questions or comments they would like to make.
Just raise your hand or just speak, Joan.
Yes, Joan.
Yes, I do. I have a question. I don't know if it's interesting.
Yeah,
It puzzles the heck out of me every time. Excuse me. Wonderful evening with you tonight, Julian, by the way. I really appreciate your personal insights, and
thank
you've
you.
been up there and you've done it, and it's really fun to hear that. Um, Back where Orsina was telling Viola that she can't experience love and because she's a woman. And she says, my father had a daughter. And he says, what happened to her? And she said, did she die? And she says, I'm all the daughters of my father's house and all the brothers too. And she doesn't know. She just said she was the daughter of her father.
At that point, I think she's accepted Sebastian as having died, and therefore she's essentially saying, "I am I'm all that's left of the children of my father, so I am his son and his daughter." I
But
That's the same sense of her trying to embody um, Sebastian's spirit after his presumed death.
but says she doesn't know if somebody died or not.
Oh, and yet I know not. You mean the and yet I know not?
Yeah.
I've always taken the and yet I know not differently. She has just told something which is not a lie, but is misleading. And I think she's so overwhelmed by the implications of, can I be myself? Can I be my brother? Can I
Uh,
be Cesario?
oh, I
That,
see.
and yet I know not is kind of throwing up her hands. Um,
Okay.
Unlike Rosalind, and we're not reading as you like it this year, but maybe next year. Um, unlike Rosalind, Viola is very passive in some ways. "Oh, time, thou must untangle this, not I." She says,
Mhm.
"I've gotten myself in this crazy situation. I can't extricate myself from it." She's sort of giving it up to fate. And for that reason, I think it's all the richer when her brother reappears
Yeah.
and is alive, that she's grieved for him, she's said goodbye to him, and and now he's back.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Finally, I have some uh, ending about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Randall?
Yeah. Do you think Shakespeare identified with the fools uh,
Yeah.
with
I,
in
I, I
in
think he had identified with all his fools because his fools get to say truths that no one else can.
yeah.
So, it's a little like the class clown, the guy in the back row who's always putting up his hand and throwing in something, uh, maybe the teacher really didn't want to deal with, or doesn't have a good answer for, but pricking away at convention and self-importance and the kind of roles that people feel compelled to play, uh, because they always say that Hamlet embodies Shakespeare's voice on some level. I think there's truth in that, but I think his fools also embody a spirit in him of mischief and contrarianness, if that's a word.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
about the best answer I can make.
I think Martina had her hand up too.
Marty?
No?
No, she's just waving.
Okay.
Somebody did. There was somebody who had their hand up.
Yeah, I thought so.
One room for one more question, if anyone, or observation, if anyone wants to make it. All righty, we'll close it down then. Thank you
I
for
just want,
sticking with me.
yeah, I just
Uh,
want to do a shout out to Martina. She's up there where the fires are in Washington. I hope
oh
you're
yeah,
okay.
how are
Yeah,
things?
yes. Fortunately, it didn't jump the road.
Oh,
south
good.
of me, but I did have one. I used to live in that neighborhood, and one of my friends stayed with me for several days during the fire with her dog. I'm one of
Wow.
the few people who had fenced yard. Yeah,
Did her house survive?
her house was fine, but
Oh,
they
good.
lost about there were about 15 houses that were lost, and one death that they know of, and it was the guy who didn't want to evacuate.
Yeah, that's what happens.
So, and
Anyway,
only it's 75% contained right now. They're just doing mop up at
Good.
the moment.
Okay.
okay, we send you our prayers.
Oh, I don't need. They need them.
We send you all.
Let me
All right,
just,
anybody
as a
else?
Oh,
bit of
and
a,
happy
let me say
souls.
just as
Happy solstice! Yes,
Yeah.
today.
yeah,
Happy
as a bit
Father's
of a
Day.
preview, let me say that the plays I always give as my three favorite Shakespeare plays are three of the next four we are doing.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
Good.
much as I love nearly every play in the canon, Measure for Measure is a very special one to me and a very modern play, I think. It's a play that really came into its own in the 20th century, as did King Lear. The 18th and 19th were just not ready for Measure for Measure. So I hope you'll follow me on a fascinating journey through Measure for Measure. It's an amazing piece of work. And
And
I'll
we
see
will
you
send
all in about
yeah,
3 or 4
we'll,
weeks.
we'll send the recording out tomorrow. I hope everybody's been getting the recordings. If not, just email us. And thanks for being here and making this happen today.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Julian.
Thank you.
God
Bye-bye.
bless.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Janie.